also about social media. Welcome to the show. This is episode 3 of Earbud U. Now, I love people who operate irreverently in whatever space it is that they have chosen to operate. Brad Heckman is one of those guys. He's an entrepreneur and does so many other things that it's amazing that no private company has picked him up yet. He tries to get the word out about mediation and mediation best practices in the New York City area. Now, this involves navigating the political, cultural, and social centrifugal force that is New York City, and he does it quite well. There are lines everywhere in our lives. Lines mark boundaries. They delineate places to go and places not to go. They act as invisible fences. It's said that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. We all learned that in 8th grade geometry class. But for some folks who see lines as boundaries that separate rather than as a collection of points that join us, guys like Brad exist and work at a consequential level in the real world to eliminate those lines. And he's building an independent practice, trying to pay the rent, and is trying to get paid in a timely fashion. As you listen to the podcast interview, you'll notice some long pauses. Now, Brad and I were having some trouble getting together on some of the questions, but when we did finally unite, the answers were really great. Now, on to the usual housekeeping. You can connect with Earbud U on Twitter, at Earbud U. You can also check us out on our Instagram page, Earbud U, all smacked together, all one word. We tweet and post images on both of those social platforms with the hashtag #BePartOfTheShow, which you should know by now. Part of our parent company, Human Services Consulting and Training out of Endicott, New York. So check out the HSCT website at www.hsconsultingandtraining.com. As for Brad Heckman, well, check him out at newyorkpeace.org and his blog, thehecklist.wordpress.com. He's on Twitter at Hecksign and at NYPeace. Finally, if you need mediations done right and you need them done by seasoned professionals, check out the New York State Dispute Resolution Association online at nysdra.org. Now, let's get on with the show.
Welcome to Earbud U, episode number 3. Get your knowledge on through your earbuds. Our special guest for our 3rd podcast episode is Brad Heckman, blogger, CEO of the New York Peace Institute, noted speaker, mediation trainer, NYU adjunct professor, social media monster, and exposed in many other areas. We know Brad personally from the work that he does at the New York Peace Institute. We're also a rabid follower of his on Twitter, as well as other social media networks through which he pumps his delicious and invigorating content. Brad has spoken at TEDx and has done a TED Talk, which had awesome pictures of cows attached to it, which we really, really enjoyed because we're very graphical over here at Earbud U. We also appreciate the fact that Brad has been intimately involved with the New York State Dispute Resolution Association and was responsible for getting us, into that organization and getting us presenting there a couple years ago now. Actually, not last year, a couple years ago now. So, welcome to Earbud U, Brad.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jesan. Thank you so much.
Excellent. So let's start off with our first question for our listeners. What exactly is it that you do on a regular basis? Like, what does your day-to-day look like?
My day-to-day? Well, so I'm the CEO of New York Peace Institute, and which I absolutely love. Much of that is being an administrator and a bureaucrat and looking at spreadsheets and dealing with wonderful people. And I also get to train and teach, which I absolutely love. Very often I'm teaching at NYU in the evenings, so being an adjunct professor is my side hustle to my day job. And when I'm not doing that, I'm, as you beautifully said, I'm lecturing or presenting or trying to get the word out on New York Peace Institute and on mediation in general.
Excellent. Well, it sounds as though you're very, very active, and you're keeping yourself very, very busy over there, or I should say, not over there, down there in New York City. What's that like to sort of build a mediation practice in the middle of the cultural, social, and in some cases, some people would say the political capital, of the United States? What's that like to be? And I know this is a loaded term, at ground zero.
Yeah, so to speak, it's a great question, and it's hard to know where to start. It reminds me of a journalist, Chilean journalist, who was asked, "What's it like to live in such a long and skinny country?" So, New York is a great place to practice conflict resolution because we're forced to live together. For those of your viewers who have been to New York City, we live in very small apartments, often separated by a mere 3/4 inch of drywall, and somehow, for the most part, we get along, and we're a real mishmash and a mosaic of different languages and cultures and backgrounds and orientations. And it's, for me, New York City is just a great, great statement of humanity in that it shows that people can live together and work together and get along, and nevertheless, sometimes we don't. So to be able to be a little piece of being the glue that binds us together in New York City it's really an honor, and it's a great place to learn and to be curious and be a student of human nature.
And it's interesting that you bring up that fact about being curious and that quarter inch of drywall, because a person who comes from the Midwest like myself, it does have some East Coast background, but comes from the Midwest. I've had many conversations with folks in the Midwest about being from as they put it, back east, and they always say, hey, look, we don't know what's going on out there, and you all don't know what's going on here. And I think we also had a conversation about that at the first NYSRA conference that I attended, sort of about the sort of center of the world sometimes attitude that maybe some New Yorkers take, sometimes, Mm-hmm. Well, now you started, like you said, you're the CEO of New York Peace Institute. You're really passionate about really being engaged with peacemaking. I'm going to ask you a key question here very early on in our conversation, and maybe you could talk a little bit about this, because I'm fascinated by the process of building a business, and I'm fascinated by what that takes at a real consequential level. Like right now, I'm kind of walking through. I don't know if you ever heard of the entrepreneur and author, but Steve Blank. I'm kind of walking through his how to do a startup process right now, and I wonder, and it's a source of frustration for me in the field, why more mediators don't go through those types of processes, in order to build an independent practice. Why so many of them dump into CDRCs or whatever the system is of the state they happen to be in, and then are frustrated when they don't make any money from their mediation, or they don't make any money from doing that peacemaking work that is very valuable work, and I believe personally and philosophically does need to be paid for. Talk to me about how you navigate both of those differing ideas. I guess some people will say, in a crude sense, the capitalism and the peacemaking. Like, how do you navigate both of those things?
Yeah, that's such a great question. When I was in college and trying to figure out what to do with my life, I said to myself, no matter what, I want a career in social justice, and I don't want to have to do marketing or manage budgets or manage people or build a business or any of that stuff, only to find out that that's exactly what I spend much of my time doing in building a nonprofit organization. And this is something that I tell my students all the time in a class that I teach at NYU called How to Build Your Own Nonprofit, which is first of all, you need to be passionate about whatever it is you believe in, whether it's a for-profit or nonprofit organization. And you also have to realize that the vast majority of your time is not going to be dedicated to the content that you are passionate about. It's going to be around building a business and doing all of those things that I was so against doing early on that I actually really enjoy doing. Because I really deeply believe in building peace and in the organization that I'm building to pursue that vision. So I think once you orient yourself to see that, getting the word out, whether it's on social media or traditional media, or monetizing the work that you do, if it's something you deeply believe in, it's all part of it and it feels good. So even the most mundane task that we have to do is really part of putting that puzzle together. So entrepreneurship was something that came to me a little bit late in life, and it's something that I've really learned to embrace and have fun with.
Yeah, and I'm a big proponent of the idea that entrepreneurship breeds freedom. and particularly for people, and I'm 34, so for people who were, my age and younger, I don't think we have, and I cock and crow about this, and I say this in every single presentation if you get me talking about entrepreneurship that I possibly can, but we don't, my generation and the generations behind me aren't going to have those social safety nets, and we're not going to have those very needed at the time, government-backed promises like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. We're not going to have those. Instead, we're going to have whatever it is that we built, and the tools to do that are just laying around right now. I watched a YouTube video of the LinkedIn CEO talking about where LinkedIn wants to go inside of 10 years, and it's just fascinating how absolutely driven towards developing professional connections and networks and really circumventing that sales funnel so that every single sale in 10 years will go through LinkedIn. That's an amazing vision from someone who started out as for a social media platform that started out just as, the business version of Facebook, and so I am passionate about entrepreneurship because, like I said, I think that breeds freedom. Talk to me about the nuts and bolts of that. How do you said, you don't want to sit in marketing meetings, and but you're on Twitter. Like, I see you on Twitter all the time, and you're a very witty Twitterer. So, like, how do you navigate both of those things?
It all feels kind of seamless to me now. I mean, it's first of all, it's fun, and I manage two Twitter accounts. One is my personal Twitter account, Heckman, which it's just bad jokes and obnoxious puns, as you well know. And my professional one, New York Peace Institute, which I also want to be fun and engaging and witty. And I think one thing I've learned is though I take my work and our mission at the Peace Institute very seriously, I don't take myself terribly seriously, and we as an organization really believe in injecting levity and humor in it. So the marketing and the outreach that we do, we try to avoid a hard sell pitch, but really just have fun with it and engage with people. So I consider the social media and the marketing that we do as really part of having a conversation. And online, that's it's our virtual storefronts, and we try to be the friendly clerks and cashiers.
Absolutely. Okay, let's switch a little bit to your background. Let's talk a little bit more about that. What was it like to work and live in Poland in the late '80s and the early '90s during that period of time when communism was ending and a new social order was beginning? Kind of similar to some historical events that have happened recently in that part of the world. What was that like then? I've never had the opportunity to kind of talk to somebody who was kind of there at that ground zero moment. So talk to me a little bit about why you were there and what that was like.
Well, sure. I graduated from college in 1989, and it was the tail end of the Cold War and the part of the Perestroika era, where the Soviet Union was opening up, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, although I saw things were changing in that part of the world, and I pretended to be an English teacher, and through a connection got a job teaching English at a university in central Poland. And as luck would have it, the revolutions broke out and the Berlin Wall fell and societies were changing. And actually, what we were talking about before, about trying to reconcile these paths of social justice and entrepreneurship, I really saw that there, and it was fascinating because before that my politics and belief system had really been in the stick it to the man kind of domain, and I don't know that I thought beyond that. And in Poland, I saw what was really a mass movement that very much was stick it to the man or stick it to the Kremlin. And my assumptions that behind that would be this kind of archetypal left-wing view of the world that we often saw in protest movements here. Yet the first thing people wanted to do after overthrowing the regime peacefully was become entrepreneurs and capitalists, and so that was the time.
Get something to eat,
and that had a real kind of a mixed. It was a real mixed bag in terms of what it brought on in society, but it was just fascinating, and seeing a lot of amazing things happen. Seeing people who were political prisoners and factory workers and avant-garde playwrights become presidents of their countries was just truly remarkable, and also accompanied by diminishing social safety nets and minority rights in jeopardy. These were countries that were rife with conflict. So seeing this paradox of the people's voice peacefully overthrowing regimes through roundtable dialogue, but at the same time seeing a lot of tensions bubble to the surface, made it just an amazing laboratory for democracy and a great place to learn about conflict resolution, and so that for me was really my introduction to the field that I'm in now, and it was an incredible experience, and hard to believe it was 25 years ago.
Well, I've often said, we have 3 generations of people in the workplace now. We've got, the millennials, we've got, the baby boomers who are in senior management positions and things like that, and then we've got the Gen Xers who no one talks about. Like my oldest sister is in her mid 40s. She's right there. She graduated, I think she graduated in '89 from high school or something like that. So she's right in there with you. And I've often said, the Gen Xers, they're the ones that are going to save us all as a generation, because you know what? I mean, you did the wars with the baby boomers. You went over and you said, hey, we want these things, give them to us, and you had those wars so that the people who were caught in between, like myself, and then the millennials, like my youngest sister, who's 26, could actually get, all that social justice, benefits that you're talking about. And you just gave it to us. You just said, you want family medical leave? Yeah, here you go. You want paid time off? Yeah, here you go. But now you've got the millennials who, and I want to get back to this concept of social justice that you've got. Do you notice when you have younger mediators coming in that, they're very passionate about the social justice, or are they kind of the way they are on Twitter? Like, hey, I'm just sort of hanging out here, and hey, what did Justin Bieber do?
Oh, those kids. Well, first of all, you're welcome for all the things that Generation X brought.
Thank you.
And before I answer the question, it's funny. I just gave a presentation in Texas for the Texas Association of Mediators, and they had a panel that was meant to be representative of the different generations. So traditionalists, baby boomers, millennials. And they couldn't find a Generation Xer to actually be on the panel. So what you're saying rings true. We are a little bit of an invisible and transitional generation. So for me, in terms of the millennials that I see, and most of my students are millennials, I think they're just remarkable. And I went to a presentation a while back that talked about how millennials, because they're so defined by social media that they lack empathy skills, because they don't have as much face-to-face interaction as they do online presences. And I couldn't disagree more. I mean, I find that the students I work with they're just brilliant. I mean, they have great senses of self. They're excellent communicators, and are able to speak truth to power in a really fascinating way. I mean, they will fact check you right there on their whatever device they have within a moment. So they're able to call BS, but they have great communication skills with which to do it. So I have learned so much, including everything that I attempt to do on social media. I owe it to the Generation Y folks, and I think it's very rare for one generation to say, oh yeah, the kids coming up today are so much smarter than us. It's usually the opposite, and I actually am rather in awe of the millennials.
Yeah, I can tell you, being located in upstate New York, the struggles that I have are not necessarily with the millennials, and there's very few here, but those are not necessarily the struggles that I have. The struggles that I have are with the entrenched, boomer generation, really, really struggling with, kind of, hey, how much power do we give up? Can we give up power? Can we share power? What's this collaboration thing? And again, you got to understand, they came out of the experience of, and I'm doing a presentation. I'm presenting a paper at an interdisciplinary conference coming up here pretty soon around online reputation management and neurobiology and a couple of other things all mixed together. And so one of the things that I have noted in my paper is that baby boomers, we marched in the 60s and we gave in the 90s, and we're going to be comfortable keeping giving, whereas millennials are like, hey, how can I get involved with the Acumen Fund? Can I go to to a country in Africa, or can I go to Southeast Asia, or can I even go around the corner and teach some kid to read? Can I go do that? Versus, or how can I collaborate with them? Versus, hey, you know what? I got to get mine. I don't have to collaborate. So that's very interesting to me, seeing that generational breakdown and those shifts kind of happening in our social culture, and I'm fascinated by all that because of the conflict that it brings. Now, talk to me about some of your mediation mentors. Who were those people that really said, took you under their wing and said, "Hey, Brad, you've got the skills. I believe in you. You can go out and do this." Who are the people that said, you're the man. Keep going?
Well, they happen to be baby boomers, so props to them. There were so many. They were mainly people that I worked with when I was doing work in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union during this great time of transition. And one in particular, a gentleman named Dusan Ondrušek, who is the director of the center in Slovakia that I worked with, and he's still doing amazing work. And, this is a group of people that approached mediation from a very different way. So here in the States, it's not unusual for mediators to come from a legal background or a social work background. And I'm very proud that at New York Peace Institute, we have a real smorgasbord of professions in our 400-person mediator pool. In the regions that I was working in, since the idea of community mediation was something fairly new, they kind of reinvented it and made it their own, and mediators often came from creative backgrounds, or they were former political dissidents, or just kind of offbeat characters, which really resonated with me. So I felt I was learning mediation together with people who may have been recently introduced to mediation, but had just tremendous life experience in transforming their societies. So there's kind of that group of people who influenced me. And then someone who I consider to be a mentor is a gentleman named Raymond Schoenholtz, who passed away a couple of years ago, sadly, who was the founder of Partners for Democratic Change, the organization that I worked for when I was doing international work. And he was also the founder of one of the first community mediation centers here in the States, Community Boards, which is based in San Francisco. And he was, I would say, a real social entrepreneur. So one of these people who did help me reconcile these worlds of social justice and entrepreneurship. And just a force of nature, someone who believed so deeply in mediation and negotiation that when we would travel together, Ray would go into hotels with no intention of ever staying in the hotel, but he just wanted to negotiate room rates with the concierge. Hardwired to negotiate and proselytize about mediation, and is responsible for really, being kind of the typhoid Mary of mediation in the Balkans and Eastern Europe and the Baltics and South Caucasus. And I'm surrounded by plenty of mentors here, including my peers here at the Peace Institute.
Excellent. Well, you can get mentors, from up the ladder and obviously, from down the ladder, people that you admire on both ends. So excellent. Well, that's the mediation mentor piece is always something that I struggle with, and I think you find mentors obviously maybe in a graduate program or at a CDRC or something like that. I always personally struggle with, who's a mentor that I'm going to find, and then how am I going to navigate that mentorship relationship, because it's a give and take. It's not just I go there and I suck you dry from all the experience you had and then I run away. It's what am I going to give you, and how am I going to give that to you? And so what I've done here in my practice is I've taken on, how can I help other people who are behind me who aren't doing what I'm doing right now but want to, how can I sit down and have those conversations with them on a regular basis? So now,
just jumping out, I just want to point out to your viewers that while you may see me, I am actually staring into a still photo of Jesan ripping his shirt open in a Superman-like heroic pose. So I'm actually making eye contact and engaging with this just beautiful statue. I think your audience should know that. So I'm sorry to interrupt.
Thank you for pointing out. Yeah, I do love the logo. It is very heroic. Well, it comes from my comic book background. I love comics. I love that idea of good vanquishing evil, but then there being that little bit of ambiguity at the end of the day. My favorite character for many, many years on the comic book side has been Batman, just because, Batman's the guy who not about conflict resolution. He is, but, he's about, resolving it with his fists. But one of the happiest days that I've ever had is when the Batman followed me on Twitter. So Batman follows me around, so that's kind of awesome.
Really? Wow.
kind of makes now my life is complete. The circle has been closed.
Excellent. Well done, sir.
Thank you. Well, do you ever have and I ask all my guests this question. It's a standard question, and I love the movie High Fidelity with John Cusack. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but yeah, there's so many little moments in that film, and being a film guy, and being a cinematic guy. That film kind of brought together everything for me, the creative piece, and then the thematic piece, and then the just how am I going to be a good human being piece, all together. And I think the script was really, really excellently written. But John Cusack plays, a record store owner, for the benefit of those who haven't seen the movie. So he plays a record store owner who owns a kind of one of those old school neighborhood record shops that existed before MP3 players and even before CDs. And he employs Jack Black, and Jack Black is in his great role before he was overexposed and kind of doing ridiculous stuff. I think anyway. But John Cusack has this moment of personal kind of just nonsense going on, with his ex-girlfriend, and then there's a new person, and his record store isn't working, and then, his ex-girlfriend's father dies. It's just a whole thing, right? And he has a moment of frustration where he says, I just want to pack it in and go work at a Coconuts. It's just like the worst thing ever for a guy like that to go work at a chain record store. So, Brad, did you ever have a moment of frustration in your career where you just came into the office, maybe after working a really hard mediation or a negotiation where the two parties just wouldn't move, and you just threw everything down and you're like, I could go work as an admin assistant somewhere,
Well, actually, let me first ask you a trivia question about High Fidelity. Do you remember the name of Jack Black's band in that movie?
Oh, it was Sonic Death Monkey.
That was one. The one I'm thinking was Kathleen Turner Overdrive.
Kathleen Turner Overdrive, yes. Well, that was what they changed it to. So, yes, at the end, at the record release party.
Gay song, I believe. Yes, I've had moments like that, and you're reminding me of my father who passed away about 8 years ago, and he was a third grade teacher in a blue collar town in Pennsylvania where I'm from. Taught third grade for like 30 years and retired early for health reasons, and then after that, spent the last 10 years of his life working in a factory doing menial labor. And he absolutely loved it. He loved teaching, and it was an amazing teacher and a huge influence on me. But 30 years of working with 8-year-old kids and not being able to take a bathroom break and just being so dedicated to it wore on him. And he just kind of loved the zen of working in a factory and being accountable, largely to himself. And I do get that, and more often than not, I just feel so energized by the work that I do. But I've done plenty of jobs ranging from selling furniture to working in a warehouse to working in various malls, where I often felt that because I just didn't know what was coming next. And I remember I had a job in Washington D.C. where it was an internship. Actually, my job was to bring a group of mayors from Romania. So these were the first democratically elected Romanian mayors to the United States, and I had to squire them around to different cities, and they were here on a U.S. State Department study tour. And the idea was to show them things in America that they could take back to their new democracy and apply to their villages. And I didn't have any control over the actual agenda. And I remember I had to take them to the Twin Cities, so Minneapolis, St. Paul, and and take them to see the Mall of America, which I imagine you may have been to as a Midwesterner. Have you been to the Mall of America?
I have a record of being in and out of the Mall of America at 20 minutes flat.
Wow, that's remarkable.
It is a record. It will never be broken. I challenge anybody out there listening to this podcast right now, email me, tweet at me. I'll give you my secrets. But in and out in 20 minutes. I figured it out.
Excellent. Well, I was there for probably 2 hours. It felt like a week, and the reason I was there was to show there were these Romanian mayors from small towns and cities and villages an example of a public-private partnership. And when they saw this just glittering gem of capitalist overkill, it was it just struck me as this is lunacy. This is probably the most non-transferable thing they're gonna see. And then trying to keep them together as a group when they're seeing all these bright and shiny stores and looking to find presents and tchotchkes for their friends back home. It was I lost one of them. I lost a Romanian there in the Mall of America. So at that point, yes, so working at a coconut, possibly within the Mall of America that I couldn't.
Right. Yeah.
Would have been a good option for me.
Yeah. You can't lose a Romanian in the Mall of America. You can't go out there down one Romanian. You can't leave.
You'd be surprised how easy it is to lose a Romanian in the Mall of America. Yeah. Email me for your secrets on how to do that.
Yeah. We'll talk later. Yeah, we'll talk later. I'll get you through that whole Romanian thing. It'll never happen to me again. Well, okay. Well, I mean, yeah. Switching back to Eastern Europe, let's talk about your work with the Roma peoples and kind of where that came from and what that looked like and kind of what was your inspiration? What was your inspiration for that?
Well, so first of all, the Roma, for those who don't know, are more commonly known as gypsies. Although the word gypsy is considered an ethnic slur, to gyp someone comes from the word gypsy. And the gypsies are an ethnic minority that migrated from India more than 1,000 years ago and lived a nomadic lifestyle for much of their time. And then under communism in Eastern Europe, they were kind of forced to settle. And after the fall of the Berlin Wall, they were really the first to lose their social safety nets. So it's a group of people that have a certain cultural identity and suffer all kinds of oppression. Even in this day, I imagine it to be similar to what the Deep South was in this country under Jim Crow. So so for example, I really wasn't able to go to restaurants or cafes with my Roma friends in some neighborhoods because of the discrimination, because they looked differently and they dressed differently, and they were very often a rather insular culture. And I didn't know. I can't say that I know what inspired me to work with them, because I grew up with a grandmother from Eastern Europe, and was regaled with stories about how the Roma would steal children and would roll into town and like vandals and steal from people and all of these things, all the kinds of things that you hear about pretty much any oppressed minority group.
Yep.
And in coming to work with Roma and know them a little bit, I was just inspired and amazed at how, these folks who have been brutalized and segregated and oppressed maintained their dignity and their integrity. And, to some small degree, I think perhaps I was accepted by some of them. But, it's just a classic underdog story of people, getting by under really difficult situations. And so, the ability to be part of a program as I was, that was designed to really promote not the assimilation of the Roma, but the inclusion and the integration of them so that they have a voice in society, was just a huge honor. And they were just a really fun group of people to work with.
Yeah. Now, talk about that difference between assimilation and, integration. We have so many arguments in the United States because we're a nation of immigrants. I look at our founding. Ain't nobody here who's from here. Let's say that. That's what I get back to. No, not nobody. So how do you preserve dignity between integration and assimilation? African Americans have been struggling with that for literally since we were pushed off of boats here, but how do you navigate that with a population that has gone from being a migratory population that was allowed to move around freely to being, in essence, told, hey, you will be here and we'll give you some goodies here and make sure you stay. And then that whole entire system goes away and now you're free to roam, but roam to where, and roam to what? How do you navigate that assimilation and that integration piece? Or do you?
Yeah, it's, for me, it's really all about the self-determination of people and what they want to be. So if they want to, anyone wants to be part of the dominant culture or have a voice, that, you should have the pathways and the ability to do that. If you want to maintain your language and your culture, and your customs, that's great. You should have the pathways and the rights to be able to do just that. And the idea of assimilation was very much what my own family, most of whom were immigrants, my grandparents, that was the ethos, that America was a melting pot. And we lose our customs and our traditions, and we become whatever middle class Americans are supposed to be. So I grew up with grandparents that spoke 5 or 6 languages among them, and my parents learned none. And that's assimilation, and I think we lost a lot in that transition. Rather than seeing the world or the United States or any country as a melting pot, I think looking at it as a tossed salad is really a better way, where we can all be together in the same bowl, but still maintain our individual flavors that collectively make a tasty dish. So
Yep.
I think that's as a tortured analogy. That's one way of looking at it. And it's actually making me quite hungry for a salad.
For a salad right now, yeah. Well, I think as we become more of a globalized culture, also, Brad, the ways in which that salad gets tossed around are going to change, and this is why I'm so passionate about social media, because it's an ultimate expression of that democratic space, I think, where you're going to have the people who are going to come into the commons and they're going to wreck it, but you're also going to have those people who are going to come into the commons and are going to want to preserve it, and then you're going to have the vast majority of people who are going to come into the commons and are going to look around and be like, I don't know, I don't know what I want to do, but I'm just going to hang out here for a little bit and see kind of what's going on. And my struggle, or not my struggle, but the focus of my business, and my struggle is how do you balance all 3 of those perspectives? Because I think all 3 of them are equally valid, maybe not equally great, but equally valid. A person who's going to come in and trash the comments, clearly from their perspective, thinks that they're doing something that's going to benefit them, and they're coming at it from that selfish point of view. But so is the person who comes in saying, from that other extreme, who says, I want to preserve it, in its pristine glory. And again, this is the tortured analogy, but I'm relating it to social media. I want to preserve social media in its pristine glory, and Facebook will never change. But as in a globalized culture, you can't have that. You gotta have that tossed salad. You gotta have everybody coming in, mixing it up, which is why mashups and memes work so well on the internet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we've talked a lot about a lot of heavy stuff. We talked about working with Roma peoples, and we've talked about your experiences in Eastern Europe. We've talked about John Cusack and High Fidelity. What do you do? So let's get to the fun part. What do you do for fun? What do you do to shake the cobwebs off? What do you do when you're not tweeting or solving the problems of the world, or working in Eastern Europe, or going down to Texas so that they have a Gen Xer to show up on a panel somewhere? Like, what do you do for fun?
It's funny because the discussion of work-life balance comes up frequently among very, very driven people, and for me, my work really is fun, and I feel very fortunate in that I'm able to bring some of my creative pursuits into my works. So you mentioned that I like to draw pictures, and there's pictures of cows in my TED Talk. So I'm not an artist, but I like to draw ridiculous and silly pictures. So when I train and teach, I hang and show ridiculous and absurd cartoons that I draw. So drawing and sketching and painting, those are things that I like. And, since I get to integrate that into my work, I'm like, wow, I'm like sitting at home coloring, and that kind of counts as work. So I feel kind of pulled a fast one. But
There you go.
that, it's funny. I'm very fortunate to live in New York City. I don't do nearly enough of the things that New York City has to offer. So it's as much about the possibility of doing those things as actually doing those things. So, I think we're in the golden age of TV. So there's a lot of great shows that I watch, and I get to watch them from a conflict resolution perspective and use clips from those shows and in my training and teaching, which is just great.
Yeah. What are your favorite shows right now? What do you watch? What do you got streaming in your Netflix queue right now? What do you got there?
Right now, let's see. I like The Walking Dead. I think is a great show. The Mad Men, though it seems to come out like every 2 years. Is great. Most of the HBO shows and Showtime shows I really enjoy. House of Cards is great, although Kevin Spacey is that guy
just evil.
evil. He chews the scenery in that show, and then he spits it out into little Kevin Spaceys, who then go to their own scenery. It's just this perpetual motion machine of Kevin Spacey chewing. So there's really really good stuff on TV, and I was a guy who. 20 years ago, it was one of those people who was, I don't watch the TV. I prefer the theater, and
I don't watch the TV.
a whole world in there that's just amazing, good stuff.
Well, you are right. We do live in the golden age of TV. I absolutely believe that. As some of those shows you mentioned, I love as well. I got off the train with The Walking Dead after the second season. I got off the train because there wasn't enough killing of zombies, and there was too much of this we got to preserve our humanity nonsense, which I thought, in the context of the show, I'm like, why? What are we doing here?
By the way, you'd be the only person I met who says there's not enough killing of zombies on The Walking Dead. There's a lot of killing of zombies on The Walking Dead. I got to tell you,
Well, I think the body count went up after I stopped watching.
So we got to kill some more zombies on this show, right?
Exactly. Well, and I love The Walking Dead. I read a review of the show the other day, and the writer who wrote the review, I think, was in the Atlantic, or it might have been the New York Times. It was some highfalutin magazine. They were talking about, and their critique of it was that, why is The Walking Dead so popular? It's never won any Emmys. It's never been nominated for any awards or anything like that, and yet it busts the ratings every single Sunday that it's on. It's a huge national event in a time when audiences are segmented. You talk about marketing. Audiences are segmented across multiple screens. We're not all having the same sort of experience with the same sort of culture anymore the way we were maybe when you were coming up in the 70s and 80s. We're just not having that unified culture because we're not all sitting around one screen anymore. But in a world where that is the reality, The Walking Dead still does bang up numbers that even underneath that old system would have been bang up numbers. And what does that say about us as a culture and as a society? And the conclusion that the writer came to was that it basically says that came to the conclusion that it's just a phenomenon that we have to live with, and it's great, and isn't it awesome that we live in the golden age of TV? Which I agree with him about that, but what I think it says is kind of where our brains are at as a culture. I think as an American culture, we're kind of schizophrenic, and we're kind of all panicked about, we're all panicked about the end of the world. It didn't happen at that dot moment of 2000. And so it's like, what do you do? The big question of the day is, and I think it'll be the big question for the next probably 10 or 20 years until some of this flattens out. And of course, September 11th happened and a whole lot of other things. But what do you do when the end of the world doesn't come? What do you do after that? And that's a hugely existential question that I think The Walking Dead answers. Another show I think answers that is The Sopranos. Really answered that question. Also a big favorite show of mine. I sent out an email about this on my email blast recently. Breaking Bad. I love Breaking Bad.
Sure. Yeah, me too.
And so the Walter White, average nebbishy guy turns into this drug cartel, guy, and then this drug cartel leader, Heisenberg, because of something that happens to him directly. And how does he respond to that? Again, I think that speaks volumes about where we are as a culture, and where we are in conflict as a culture as well.
Yeah, and I'll say what I like about so many of those shows is they really try to show the complexity of the human condition, and so I think back in the 70s, there were great movies where you had these kind of morally ambivalent heroes. So like the Clint Eastwood characters, some of the Al Pacino characters, and The Godfather, and so on. And then after that, you had your heroes and your villains. And we see in mediation that people are far more than how they may present in one particular moment. So when we see people in conflict, we see anger or high emotion or perhaps even trauma, and it's easy to look at that one narrow slice of who they are and then extrapolate and say, well, that's who they are. They're just an angry person. The reality is we're all far more than our worst actions and our worst moments in life. So so any medium that actually captures the contradictions and the paradoxes and the complexity of people, I really like, and I think it relates really directly to what you and I are doing in our careers.
Absolutely. Well, what are some and this is a mediation podcast along with everything else, entrepreneurship, social media, all that kind of good stuff. So I got to ask you a standard mediation question here. What are some controversies right now, in the mediation scene that just, really don't drive your boat right now? You look at them and you're like, I've made a decision about that and I've moved on. And I'm not asking you to talk about specific personalities or any of that kind of stuff, but just like maybe what are some raging, and there are some things in the mediation field that I don't even look at anymore. Like, should we be transformative or facilitative? I've given up. I've thrown up my hands. It's not that I don't care about that argument anymore, but it doesn't relate kind of to what I do because I use both of those at the same time. Sometimes in the middle of a conversation, you talk about thin slicing with two parties in the middle of a mediation, or if I'm having a one-on-one sales conversation, which is honestly a form of negotiation, I'm thin slicing that entire thing, and I'm using transformative, I'm using facilitative, I'm using a typical traditional sales approach, I'm doing all those things at one time, and it's happening literally in my brain in 4 quadrillionths of a second. So I can't get involved in that type of argument. So what are some mediation maybe controversies? Maybe a loaded word there. What are some things on the mediation scene where you're just like, you know what, I'm good, thanks. I don't need to comment on that.
I think you mentioned that one of the main ones for me, which is some people's adherence to orthodoxy around their methodology, and I think for me, coming of age in this field with people internationally who were able to really meld together a melange of different styles and approaches was so influential that I tend to not engage in discussions of this model over that model. I think as long as people's self-determination is respected in mediation and the core values of mediation are upheld, I think there's a lot of leeway to be a kid in a candy store in terms of the interventions that you choose. So that's that for me is kind of a stale argument at this point. Having said that, I'm really not much of an intellectual, so or an academic, and although ironically I teach at a university, so I tend honestly not to be engaged in or really follow some of the intellectual discussions about what's happening in the field. I'm just a guy running a community mediation center.
Right, exactly. Okay, awesome. Well, let's talk about hypothetical battles. If a fair mediation battle were to occur, say between Dave Hilton and Cindy Noble, let's go. Who are you going to take in that mediation rap battle? Who are you taking?
So a mediation battle. All right.
mediation rap battle.
Rap battle. Let me try to wrap my head around what the battle even is. So Dave Hilton, all right, big guy from Texas, radio host, Cindy Noble, conflict coach from Canada. So Canada versus Texas, both mediation professionals. This is really a tough one. I think Texans are really friendly, Canadians are really friendly. So oh man, I'd have to say they're gonna hug it out, and it's gonna be a win-win. It's the only way it can end.
It's the only way. There can only be a win-win. Yeah, exactly. Well, I always ask the hypothetical battle question. That's one of my questions, as my listeners know, that I always ask every single one of my guests, no matter what field they're in. I think one of my last guests who was on a previous podcast, I asked him about Bob Dylan versus Neil Diamond, or something like that, something to that effect. He's a musician, so kind of really an awesome question. Well, we're getting ready to get close to the end here. So I've got a few frivolous questions, but they're also really interesting and kind of really give some insight into you. First off, I would like to say thank you for agreeing to come onto Earbud U, and really connecting with my podcast listeners and connecting with me. And I love having the opportunity to talk with you and go back and forth.
My pleasure.
All right. So, if there was a movie about you, if someone were to come to you from Hollywood and say, "Congratulations, Brad Heckman. We've been following you around on social media sneakily for the last 4 or 5 years. We've put together a composite sketch, and we've come up with out of the slush pile, we pulled a script. The scripts that don't get made, we pulled out one, and it's a 250-page script, and we want you to be one of the main characters in there. Who plays you in that movie?"
Well, first of all, yes. If there were a movie about me, it would indeed come from a slush pile of scripts. I don't know. In terms of celebrity comparisons, I get Crispin Glover a lot. So he's the guy who played Michael J. Fox's father on Back to the Future.
Yes.
I get Robin Williams. I get Bono. In fact, I've dressed as Bono for Halloween. I don't know that any of those guys would capture me in all of my neurotic glory. So growing up, Woody Allen was kind of a role model for me. Much less so nowadays, given what he may or may not have done. But I don't know. Any diminutive nerdy actor with a prominent nose, I think, could pretty much do the trick.
Well, I prefer to think of you. I'll think of you as the Heisenberg of mediation. There you go, with the hat and the whole pork pie hat. Yeah, you're coming in, you're going to make it happen. So
right.
So yeah, that's
though. I'm hoping.
Yeah. Well, once again, Brad, thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. What would you like to promote for our listeners today, if anything? Any upcoming projects or things you got, conferences you're going to be at, traveling you're going to be doing, or anything that you have done that you'd like people to, go back and take a look at it and kind of revisit it?
What I'd like to promote is really, I want your viewers and listeners to really connect with their local community mediation center. You mentioned NYSDRA, which I'm on the board of, and I also have the great pleasure of being on the board of NAFCM, which is the National Association for Community Mediation. As people think about how to serve their communities or how to funnel their charitable giving, the field of community mediation, we are 400 centers strong across the country, more than 20,000 volunteers doing just amazing work building peace in our communities. So as you look for a place to support, whether through your sweat equity, your volunteerism, your skill building, or your wallet, look to community mediation. So what I'd like to plug is go to nafcm.org, nafcm.org. There's a clickable map where you can find your local community mediation center, and one way or another, get involved in this field. Mediators are real heroes, I think, and those who are serving their community, I think really deserve a greater place in our pantheon of volunteers and heroes. So that's what I would like to promote.
Excellent. Well, thank you once again, Brad Heckman, blogger, CEO of the New York Peace Institute, today on Earbud U, episode number 3. We would like to say, please follow us on Twitter at earbud_U. You can also connect with us on our website, www.earbudu.com. In addition, you can take a look at our blog. We've got the Human Services Consulting and Training blog, HSCT Communication blog, at hsconsultingandtrain.blogspot.com. We've also got our website, website, hsconsultingandtrain.wix.com/hsct. I know that seems like a lot. Don't worry. The links will be below the podcast. As far as kind of, what we've got to promote here on Earbud U, get your knowledge on through your earbuds. We're going to continue to bring you some of the best and most interesting and engaging conversations we possibly can with people who are in a wide range of different areas, because there's conflict everywhere. It's not just in a CDRC, it's not just in your family, and it's not just at your workplace. It's everywhere. And there are all kinds of creative ways to engage with it and to deal with it and to address it both in your life and we would hope in ours. So we're going to bring that to you every single chance we can get in every single episode of Earbud U. Thank you once again to Brad.
Thank you.
And we are out.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.